What is up, everybody? We are back and we got our user manager working. Our user manager is set up, and in this video, we're going to just add a bunch more stuff to our user manager. Before we get into it, though, I do want to just quickly point out, usually it's just a developer preference or like the team's preference, but you could have also called this the user store or like the user repository, or there's other names as well. I understand user store because it's like storing data in memory, but for me, store gets confusing because I think of like store kit. And I like the idea of just manager as in I'm managing everything related to a user. For me, that's really easy to remember. I don't really care what naming convention you guys use. I just want to throw out there that if you see something like this in another code base, it might just not be called manager. This is just the way that I learned to code, calling these objects managers, and it works well for me. Let's jump into this now, and we had a couple other functions that I want to create in the user manager. So a couple of functions that we want to put in here. The first thing I want to do is actually attach a listener to our user database. So we set up the user profile here, and now I want to just listen in real time so that we can update our value in memory in real time. So if I look at our Firebase user service, let's create a function called to do something. And we can access the collection.document. Let's pass in maybe a user ID, type string. So the user ID document, and we'll call that add snapshot listener. Now, again, I'm going to link the video below. I did a whole video on YouTube about how these listeners work. And then in this video, we added some logic to convert the closures here. So these are escaping closures into async await. That code takes a little bit of time to set up. So I already packaged it up so that we can just use it out of the box rather than having to rewrite that code. I think hopefully in the future, Firebase is going to update their package so that when you go maybe in the far future, you'll add snapshot listener and there will be a async await solution here. But for now, I don't want to go through and actually rebuild that whole listener. So we're just going to import a package that I created that's going to do that for us. If you want to learn how to do it, obviously just watch that video, and I think it is a good learning experience. So we're going to open up a Swiftful Firestore package, which I will also put a link below, and we'll copy that. This is just a quick convenience package built on top of Firestore. So if your data model conforms to string identifiable, which basically is just identifiable, but the ID is a string, then you have all these convenience methods, including stream document, which is very similar to the auth listener that we set up in the last video. It's basically just the async await version of these closures, and then it provides us back a listener. So we're going to import this and then use that rather than rewrite all that code right now. Go to our project navigator. Let's go and add a new dependency. I'll paste in the URL for Swiftful Firestore. Let's add the package. I'm going to be on version 11.0.1. I'll add the package to the target. And let's go ahead here. I'll do it down here because we're going to move this to another file in a bit. Let's go ahead and import Swiftful Firestore. And now let's Command Shift K to get the compiler to find the package. And now we should be able to call .stream document. And I'll stream the document with the ID of the user ID. And this will give us back the listener. Remember, just like in the auth manager, we had to add a listener and then we had to store the listener in our auth manager. We're going to do the same thing for the user manager. So we're going to up here, let's write in the user manager, go ahead and let's make a private var current user listener of type listener registration this time. Listener registration is what we're getting back. And it'll be equal to nil to start. And then when we call this function from our Firebase user service, we want to return it back with a closure. So here we'll add a closure on listener configured, which is a function that returns void and provides us back the listener registration. Notice how this function is the exact same as this, so I can just pass it in directly. The stream document method returns us back an async throwing stream with T and an error. So let's go ahead and return async throwing stream. The type will be the user model, and an error. Make this at escaping to remove those compiler errors. And then last but not least, let's just rename this to stream user. I'm calling it stream because of the async throwing stream. You can call it listen or something if you'd prefer. So now this also needs to be part of our protocol up here. So now in my code base, down in my user manager, let's go ahead and create a private func, and we'll say add current user listener. So if there is an existing current user listener, let's go ahead and remove it. Then let's go ahead and create a task, and we'll say for await value in service dot stream user. Let's pass in the user ID when we go and do this. So we'll pass in the user ID, and then on listener configured, we'll do in a second. And then I'll open the brackets here. So here we're streaming the user document. So we're going to listen to this document in real time. And anytime any value in here changes, this whole document should funnel back into our code automatically. So this here is going to be that new value when it changes. We'll set the self.currentUser equal to the value as it changes. And let's also store a reference to our listener. So we'll click enter here. This will be listener in, and we'll set self.currentUserListener equal to the listener. Let's see, this call can throw. Let's go ahead and fix that for try await. Because it's throwing, let's just make a do catch statement here. And if there is a problem, let's just print out error attaching user listener, and we'll print out the error for now. Again, we're going to add analytics later. In the success, let's also print out fully listened to user, and let's maybe print out the value dot user ID. So we'll make sure it's the same user ID as our authentication service. So now in real time, we should be able to update our current user so that we can use that throughout our code base. We are calling login multiple times throughout the application. Every time it launches, we call login, and anytime the user signs in or signs out, we call login. So let's go ahead and after we successfully log in, let's go ahead and add current user listener with the auth.uid. Let's build it. As soon as I run the app, it should log in, and then it should add the listener. And we'll just make sure that our listener does successfully configure quick. All right, the app is launching. We should get our auth listener to succeed and then our user manager to succeed as well. All right, let's see what we got. All right, user's already authenticated and then successfully listened to listener. The listener pumped back twice, which is okay. I don't think there's a problem there. This is probably something to do. The Firebase SDK might have like a locally cached version and then a remote version. Might be why it pops in twice. But regardless, I don't really care as long as it is listening to the user document, which is the same ID, and that is awesome. Let's go ahead and add a couple more methods in our user manager just to wrap this up. Let's create a func down here called sign out. So when we sign out of the application, we are obviously signing out of the authentication. We don't really need to do anything in our database, but we do want to now update our user manager. So the current user should get set back to nil. And actually, even before that, let's make sure that the listener stops listening. So this listener, let's go ahead and listener.remove if it is still active, and we'll set it equal to nil. Then we'll set the current user in our user manager to nil. And I think that's all we need to do. Let's also create a delete current user. And now we need to actually delete the user's document in Firestore. So let's go to our Firestore Firebase user service, func delete user, pass in a user ID of type string, async throws, and we can call collection.document. We'll pass in the user ID. We'll say .delete. I think this is try await. And while we're here, I just want to point out quickly, because we're using the Swiffle Firestore, there are a bunch of convenience methods in here that we have not used. So if we made our user model, if we conformed to the string identifiable protocol, let me import identifiable by string. This is a package within the Swiffle Firestore package. Now all I need is an ID of type string, in which case I'll just use the user ID. Because it already knows what the ID is going to be for the document, as in the document ID, I could now also just call from here, try await collection dot set document, and we'll pass in the user. So rather than having to worry about this every time, we can just set the document and it knows the ID from the user is going to be the document ID. Similarly, down here, I can call try await collection dot delete document with the user ID. For me, once I get going, these are just easier convenience methods. If you look at the repo for Swiftful Firestore, which I will again link below, you can see all the available methods. I'm going to put these back to our original just because I don't want you guys to couple your code to these packages if you don't have to, but be my guest to go ahead and refactor to that if you want. I'll even delete this for now. All right, in the delete user, we are now deleting a user. Let's come down to our code here. Let's do try await service.delete. We need delete user in our protocol. Delete user. And now we need the user ID. If the user is signed in already, we have our listener attached. So we should be able to get the ID from the current user. So in here, let's say guard let UID equals current user dot user ID. Else, let's throw an error. So enum, let's call this user manager error of type localized error, and we'll just say case no user ID. So in here we will throw user manager ID dot no user ID. We'll make this throws, or actually async throws, and then we'll pass in our user ID. Actually, as a convenience, because I don't want to do this code a bunch of times, let's create a private function here and let's call it current user ID, which is also a throwing function, and it returns us a string. So we can just cut this code, put it in here, and we'll return the UID. And now we can just say let UID equals try current user ID, just to make this code a little bit more reusable if we do this in a bunch of functions. All right, so delete current user is working. After we delete the document, we should then also sign out. So we do all this stuff as well. There's one more method that I want to do in this video, which is updating the user document. So if we jump to the onboarding completed view, we already have some code in here. When we finish onboarding, we are supposed to save the user profile with the color that they selected. When we created the user model, we already created fields for did complete onboarding and adding the profile color hex. So let's go ahead and jump into our Firebase user service. Let's create one more function. I'll create it up here, and I'll say mark onboarding. We'll pass in the user ID of type string, as well as the profile color hex of type string, async throws, and open the brackets. Now, instead of setting data for the entire data model, in this one, we're going to update data so that we only touch the fields in the document that we are changing. So we'll try collection.document. We're going to go to the user ID, same document, and then we'll update data. So this is a dictionary where we're only going to pass in the fields that we want to touch. So dictionary here. Now, what keys do we want to touch? In the user model, we added these coding keys already, and now we can access them directly. So let's go ahead and access the user model.coding keys. Let's go for the did complete onboarding. We want the raw value. The raw value is the string value here. And that's the key. The value will be true for did complete onboarding. And then we'll also do the user model coding keys dot profile color hex raw value. And we'll set that one equal to the profile color hex that we pass in. This needs to be try await. Let's take our function syntax and make it part of the protocol up here. Let's come down to our code base. In our user manager, we'll create a function called mark onboarding complete for current user. Notice how the syntax here is slightly different from the syntax in the user service, right? So in here, let's get the user ID. We'll copy this line of code, and then we'll say try await service dot mark onboarding completed, pass in the UID. Let's get the profile color hex from the actual application. We'll make this async throws. We should be able to pass this in as well. All right, let's call these three functions from our code. So I'm going to go to let's start with the mark onboarding complete. Let's go to the onboarding completed view. Is completing profile setup is true. Let's go ahead and remove our fake loading indicator. Let's go ahead and load in our user manager. Call this the user manager. And then in here, let's go ahead and try await user manager dot mark onboarding completed, and we'll pass in the selected color, which is a color. So let's say let hex equals the selected color dot to hex. We created this extension earlier in the course, and we'll pass in the hex. After that it's successful, we'll set this to false, and then update the view state. Put a little note here, dismiss screen. And I guess this to hex is optional. Let's jump into the definition here. It is optional. What I'm going to do is actually just open up our assets folder. This is our accent color. The accent color is this hex color. And I am just going to, let's go to our constants file, and let's just make a static let accents color hex, set it equal to this hex string. Not that this is ever going to actually be nil, because to hex should always work, but just for the compiler, let's add constants dot accent color hex here. And we'll notice that the previews are not working, right? So we need to add an environment object to the previews. So our user manager service, and in here, now we don't want to use our Firebase service when we're working with the previews, right? We could, but we won't have much control over it. So let's just jump back to our user manager. Now that we have our protocol set up, we should be able to create a struct called mock user service and conform to the user service protocol. Let's just quickly conform to it, and then we're going to update it later in the course. So let's go and inject the user that we want. So just like the auth service, I will open up a second editor here and jump into our mock auth service. Let's copy this code here, paste it in here, except this time it's going to be a user model. This will be the user model. Save user, we're not going to do anything right now. Mark onboarding complete, we don't need to do anything. Stream user, let's add an async throwing stream. Click enter, this will be the continuation. We'll say if let current user, continuation dot yield the current user, continuation. And if there is none user, we're not going to do anything right now either, just to get a mock service up and running. So let's jump back to the onboarding completed view. And now in here, we should be able to put a mock user service. Cool. Let's Command Shift F and look for sign out in our settings view. All right, we have our auth manager.signout. Let's pull in our user manager as well. User manager. Because we're adding a user manager, let's also make sure that we add it to the environment. So we'll add in here a user manager, mock user manager, or mock user service. The user, I'll do the same thing as the auth. We'll just do mock there. Here I will put the .mock user, and then here I'll put a mock user as well. And then in our actual code, we should be able to update after we sign out of the auth. Let's go ahead and try user manager .sign out. And then in delete account, we should also try await user manager .delete account. Delete current user. We're going to refactor some of this into like async await later in the code base. I understand that this is happening sequentially. So first this runs and then this runs, and then we're going to refactor it later, but it's not a big deal for our purposes right now. Lastly, I think we need to copy the environment here and jump to our app view. I think I forgot to put the user manager, the auth manager, and the user manager into the previews here. Let's go ahead and add both of these. We'll make a auth manager, mock auth service, and this is show tab bar. So I guess there should be a user here. We'll call mock, and the user here will be .mock as well. And then in here, I think we will do user is nil. Here we can go nil as well. I think that gets these to compile at least. Great. Lastly, let's Command R, build and run to the simulator. And hopefully all of this works. I will pull up our database here. I'll try to move this all on one screen so you guys can see it. So we got in our console for Xcode, we can see that 4KF is the user we're on. So it's this document here. Now, when I go through onboarding, I should be able to select a color. Let's use the red color. And when I click finish, this document should update, and the current user listener should also update as well. So let's go ahead and finish. Did complete onboarding is true. Profile color hex is here. Successfully attached to listener, again printed out. So our user did update. And it looks like our user here, this is not the color that I selected. So let's make sure our profile view is updating. So in our profile view, we must have a color somewhere. In the info section, current user.profile color. The current user is our mock user right now. All right, so let's set this equal to nil to start. And then when this screen appears, we have a function called load data. I guess this is our fake loading for the avatars, but let's also just set self.user or current user equal to the user manager. Let's pull in our environment user manager dot self private var user manager. And now we should be able to access the user manager dot current user, which is stored in memory through our listener. At the bottom on the preview, let's just make sure that we also have our user manager here. We'll pass in the mock user manager, mock user service with a mock user. Let's go ahead and build and run this. And now if we did everything correctly, the listener should automatically attach. And then the profile color hopefully is red if our profile color hex saved correctly. So I definitely know that it's saved here. Let's jump to it. And this is actually the accent color. Okay, so our user database is syncing, but we have a bug in our toHex function. Okay, I got that toHex function from ChatGPT earlier in this course. I just did a little quick debugging, and I actually changed the toHex to a new function called asHex, and that's what we're going to use in this app now. So I'm going to attach the updated file to this video as well. But by the time you're watching this, I will have also updated the original color file. So you probably already have the right code in your code base as hex. So maybe your code actually did work on the first run. I'm just going to go to my onboarding completed view, and let's do as hex. And it's not optional. So now it should work. Let's go ahead and build and run this. Sorry guys, I did not know that that was not going to work. Just one of those times where you probably shouldn't have used ChatGPT and should have used Stack Overflow. All right, so I am going to now, let's delete the account while we're here. So this document should delete when I delete my account now. Documents deleted, awesome. We got our new user profile here. Let's go on through, teal color. Hopefully this saves. That looks like a different hex. When we go to the profile screen, it is working. Love when everything works. Great job, everybody. All right, that's it for this video. That was a lot of code. In the next video, we're going to wrap up the user manager. We're going to move some of the code into different files and clean up some stuff. And I'm going to talk about one potential bug that we have in our user manager right now. I will note before we move forward though that the auth manager and the user manager, the auth manager is the most difficult data dependency. The user manager is second, and then after that, everything else gets easier. So we're covering these. These are difficult, but it's going to get easier from here. Let's Option Command C. I will feature, and let's call this user manager. And in parentheses, I'll put complete, because the last time I committed it with the progress. Stage it, commit it, push it up to GitHub, and I'll see y'all in the next video.